I'm Neil Dubord, Chief of the Delta Police Department. This week on our show...
we're all type A personalities and we deal with other people's problems and we help people overcome problems in their life, and I couldn't deal with this. I didn't want to admit defeat to a pill.
Bend, don't break. This is a Delta Police podcast.
Hear more about how police officers strengthen their resiliency through the power of story.
First of all, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you being courageous enough to be able to come join us in our series, Bend, Don't Break, Geoff. So I know that we've had a ton of interaction over the course of the last several years. And as I sit across from you, I see a healthy, vibrant young man who's a commercial pilot and has lots going for their lives, but that wasn't always the case. So prior to us getting into your story, I just want to take a few seconds and talk about our series. And as we move through these series, we've been receiving some great comments from people that have written into us about the Bend, Don't Break series and talking about some of these significant issues our first responders go through and how they overcome them. So I wanted to take a minute today just to be able to read one of the emails that I've received that really speaks so much to what we're trying to do. And here it comes. It comes from someone onto our website, and it says, "There's total admiration for these incredible, courageous people sharing their stories and for you making this stuff public when the others would most try to sweep it under the rug. A huge thank you for protecting the public. I'm heartbroken that they have had to endure such hardships just because they wanted to help others. Also, the artwork for Bend, Don't Break logo is fantastic." So, it's obvious that I think we're having some success in what we're doing, and I'm encouraging others to be able to go onto our website, leave their comments, because those kind of comments mean a whole bunch to not only the people that are producing these podcasts, but also others that are listening and participating in this event. So, if you're interested in participating in the events, please go to our website, and there's a general email address that you can then send your email into. So I wanted to start off that way, and certainly being courageous is something that you have been. And I want to get into the Geoff Young story, and many of the facts are now publicly available for us to be able to read, and some of those are difficult to be able to work through. Let's call a spade a shovel and put it on the table. But I want to hear more about sort of your struggle. And you talked about sort of how you underwent an illness, and as a result of the illness, you then went to see a medical doctor. And maybe just pick up from there and talk a little bit about that and get us through to the point where all of a sudden you realize that you're on opiates and you may be addicted.
Okay. But thanks for having me. I'm a big fan of this podcast, and I listen to a lot of podcasts. So to be here to share my story is, hopefully it reaches somebody, and that, bad stuff can happen to good people. So my struggle with opioids, it began, not only did I have a struggle with opioids, but I also was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and I've managed that. It's tough when you get diagnosed with something and you're very young. There's a lot of shame. And having irritable bowel disease, it's not something that's very openly talked about. But I had complications with that, which led me to several hospital stays and surgeries where I was put on a very strong narcotic painkiller. And it works. It works very well for its purpose to get rid of pain and to make patients comfortable. I think what the doctors didn't realize is that throughout my surgeries and complications, that having me on these narcotics for 23 months would probably have some type of effect on me. And some type of effect is quite an understatement. It basically threw my life into a spiral, and it was a downward spiral. I think coming out of it, and looking back at what I went through, there's a lot of things that I'm very grateful for. Number one, I'm grateful that I was addicted to opioids by the medical profession. I learned a lot about addiction going through this, and the one thing that I think I benefited from is that I wasn't addicted to opioids because of my lifestyle, because I didn't associate painkillers or, getting high as something that was entertaining. Something
it's not a street level drug, really, is it? It's not something that you would go and buy on the street. You're getting this through a prescription.
Yeah, and honestly, throughout all my surgeries, I was comfortable. Like, the doctors gave me medication, so I was comfortable. So I didn't feel pain. And then while I was going through that, other complications arise where my pain level increased. So they would increase. And it was just a continuous increase in painkillers until it was to a point where I was going into withdrawals when I was still taking painkillers, because it wasn't high enough to keep me comfortable. And I'm not going to get into the way painkillers work in the body, but there is no ceiling for painkillers. You can build up a tolerance and keep taking them until you're taking 1,000 milligrams a day. And I wasn't at that level, but from doctors, they've told me that they've had patients who have, been on doses twice as much as I was. So,
tell me about the emotions, sort of what's happening. So you're on painkillers, you're killing the pain, you're feeling, I guess, numb to a certain extent. And when do you finally come to the realization that this isn't going the direction you need to? Like, how does that happen?
So I wasn't numb. And this is the funny part, that when you're on long-term opioids for pain, that your body adjusts to it, so that if I wasn't taking them, I wouldn't feel normal. So yeah, I didn't have any pain from what I was dealing with medically, but if I didn't take painkillers, I didn't have any energy. I was basically taking them to level out, to feel normal. And if you could observe me in those days, I didn't go out. I was quite isolated. I always looked for excuses not to go to family dinners or socialize with friends, because the time between my dosing or when I felt like I needed to take more painkillers was getting shorter and shorter. They would wear off quicker. I'd need to take higher doses. So eventually I never went out, because I was terrified to be away from my pills. And it sounds horrible. Like it sounds like I was just a slave. If I was going out, it was either to go to a doctor, get more painkillers. If I was outside doing something, I had enough painkillers for that day. If I was inside, I was waiting for a doctor's appointment. So it really, like, my life was dictated on medication, and I didn't actually realize it until one of my hospital visits when I was admitted for another minor surgery. They decided to lower my dose, and I started going into withdrawals in the hospital, and I was quite uncomfortable. It's honestly, it's a hard feeling to explain to someone who's never gone through it, and they really didn't do a lot. And looking back, that would have been an ideal time to medically wean me off and get me off of them or find another substitute. So they came and spoke to me. They said, we think you're addicted to painkillers, and I agreed, because I felt it. I knew I needed them. And they had a psychiatrist come and speak to me just to make sure I wasn't suicidal. I said no. There were a lot of days where I wished I would just never have woken up, because it was quite frustrating not being able to get off these. And then they sent me home with a prescription, more. So
of the same painkiller?
Yes. So I leave, and I basically just go back to my dosing. So, and I went through a few avenues to get off, through pharmacists, through various doctors, and we all know how that turned out. Not a very proud moment in my life at all, but there was so much. I think I was just so I was so embarrassed and so ashamed to admit defeat to a substance. You know, we work in a profession where, you know, we always win, you know, and I don't mean that as a, you know, a negative, but, you know, we might lose the battle, but we always win the war. You know, the police always get their man. You know, we're all type A personalities, and we deal with other people's problems, and we help people overcome problems in their life. And I couldn't deal with this. I didn't want to admit defeat to a pill. And so that's what kept it hidden. I mean, my wife would ask me, "Do you think you need help?" "No, I can do this on my own." And I would get mad. I would get very mad and angry for being confronted like that, like I was weak, like I needed help, and I knew I needed help. But
so you're obviously feeling a whole bunch of different things at this particular time. And what's happening at work?
So when all of this started, I was actually seconded to a integrated traffic section, URSU, based out of Langley. I was there when all of the complications from my Crohn started, and I really didn't work very much at all. I would come in, I think after the first initial surgery, I think I was off for 3 to 4 months. I came back briefly, and then I needed another surgery. So at the time when I was working for URSU, the few times that I did, I wasn't a slave to painkillers.
You weren't medicated at that time, yeah?
No, I mean, it was, if I needed it, it was to be comfortable to get to sleep at night, because I had a little bit I was achy, but it wasn't a, you know, every 2 hours, every 3 hours sort of thing. It wasn't, I wasn't hooked on them. I was being prescribed, I mean, copious amounts, but it hadn't ruled my life yet. Eventually it got to the point where I was having surgeries. I think I had six in 1 year. I had the last time I was admitted was early 2015, and that was, I think, February 2015, and that's when I realized that I was on painkillers for way too long, and once they lowered the dose, my body started to basically scream out for more. So.
And you needed a way to get them, and you weren't getting prescribed anymore. So what happened there?
So I was getting them, but they were drastically reducing, and yeah. So that's where my brain just went all squirrely. My thought process was completely flawed at the time, and because the doctors weren't writing me enough, I started altering prescriptions, and I knew it was wrong. Absolutely, I did, but I didn't know where else to go. Obviously, I never thought there would be a day in my life where I would be addicted or hooked on painkillers. I mean, prior to this happening, when you talk about someone who's addicted, what's the first thing you think about is someone in the downtown east side walking around with, no home, and that wasn't the case. I had a home, I have a home, I had a career, a car, a family, and I was addicted. And it's scary, and I think it's the fact that the stigma around it and the embarrassment and the shame prevents people from saying, hey, you know what, I need help. I can't get off these things on my own. And so I altered several prescriptions, and eventually I got caught. I got busted by the Surrey RCMP. And you know what? I think that was an amazing thing to happen to me. It was horrible at the time, obviously, but I think things could have gotten a lot worse if I never had been caught and then needed to ask for help. So, and
you were off work at this time?
Yeah, so I've been off the whole time and sick with. I had so many complications due to my surgeries that it was it was pointless for me to even try to come back. I was on long-term disability. You know, I'm 6'3"-ish, and I would think I weighed about 150 pounds. Like I looked horrible. I didn't even like looking in the mirror.
And what are you now? I'm hoping you're still 6'3".
Yeah, 6'3"-ish, and maybe 209, 209-ish.
That's right.
So it's good. You know, when people talk about hitting rock bottom, that wasn't my rock bottom. I could have gone so much deeper, and I'm grateful that I didn't. I like to refer it as a watershed moment, where, you know, someone just threw some water on my face and said, "Wake up, you need help." And that was that. So I had to deal with that. I mean, not only did I have to deal with, you know, being addicted to painkillers, I had to deal with criminal charges being approved, and then a police act investigation. So it was quite a bit of stress, and but I did get off the painkillers. Actually, I think reaching out to an inspector that was here and basically breaking down in front of him, and me thinking I'm going to get fired, and that was the first thing that came out of my mouth was, "You're going to fire me," and he reassured me that no, we're going to get you some help. So, I mean, that was amazing. I think I started crying in my living room with him. So, and yeah, and then from there I got treatment. Honestly, I would say I'm probably in the best shape of my life now. But, you know, I got through everything. I got through the criminal aspect. The charges were stayed. Crown showed compassion. And then the Police Act, which was a very lengthy process. But I felt, you know, with all the stress of going through a Police Act investigation and hearing stuff about my character and that I'm no better than a common criminal and that I should lose my job, I don't know why I wasn't as stressed as I thought I would be, but I think when you kind of almost get to hell and come back and have a second chance, just everything sort of seems a lot better. And yeah, it was...
Tell me what supported you during that time. So during that time, you realized you're addicted. You were looking for, obviously, support to be able to understand what's going to come next. Family, mom, organization, what is it that sort of gives you the strength to continue?
You know, like family, work, like the management here has been amazing going through this. I had work friends that were there. It was hard to ask for help or to talk about what was going on prior to sort of hitting that so-called bottom. So to talk to people afterwards, after I'd been arrested and charged with the police, it was hard to talk about. It was hard to bring it up. And I know people did support me, but you always kind of think that people are judging you. And I think that was one of the hardest things going through this whole thing. I think one of the hardest things was just coming back through the doors here and seeing how people would accept me back, or the reception that I would feel from them. And honestly, it was great. Like, people were just happy to see that I was healthy. They didn't look at me like I was a criminal. They just looked at me that I was sick and I went through a horrible time, and that they were really glad to see me back. And it was great. So,
was there any time that was bumpy, sort of in that integration back to work? Is there something we could have done better?
Yeah, I don't mean to toot your horn or anything like that, but honestly, I think it was great. Like, my experience with having support from this department was phenomenal. I think if anything could have been different, I think it would have been on me to come forward and maybe ask for help. And it's hard. And, you know, and I've heard people, you know, the police world is quite small, and, you know, people talk, there's gossip. Sometimes it's like high school, a little more fun than high school, but people
high school
talk.
with guns.
That's high school with guns. This is Canada. Yeah, you know, people can think what they think, and, you know, I'm not a spring chicken anymore. I'm not, you know, in my 20s where image is everything. You know, people that care about me and my close friends and my shift that I work on, they know who I am, like who the real Geoff is, and not, you know, this person that they actually never saw, which I'm glad. A lot of people didn't see me. But everybody has been great. And what I was talking about is the hindsight is 2020, where people are saying, oh, well, he could have just done this, or he could have asked for help, or he should have. Who was I going to call? Like, did I just ask for anybody at the department so I can spill my guts to over the phone? I was seconded out and on long-term disability, so it was really hard for me to even think of who I was going to tell. I mean, I didn't tell my family that I was addicted to painkillers. I wasn't going to call an inspector here and tell that to. It's hard. It was really hard, and it was just it was a very tough thing to go through.
I want to touch on some things that I think I've heard you say, and I want to make sure I've sort of captured it properly, because I think there's really some gold in what you're saying for others to be able to hear your story. And the first thing I think is that I heard you say loud and clear that you needed to own it. At one point in time, I heard you say, well, there's nothing you could have done. It was upon me to do it. Mm-hmm. And that's a big thing. I think I've heard from probably 75% of the people that I've spoken to so far in this podcast that they needed to take control. They could no longer be the victim. They had to be the victor. They had to take it themselves and own it, mm-hmm. and really own it going forward. And I always talk about own it. When you switch around the letters, it's to win. So in order for you to win, you got to own it, right? And that's the first thing I heard you say. And I'll cover off on some of the other things. I'd love your comments. The second thing I heard you say is that once you started talking about it, it got easier to be able to talk about it. But those first conversations are very, very difficult.
Yeah. And, you know, once I owned it and started talking about it, in this world of addiction where you just feel isolated and alone, you're not. I mean, there's, you know, I went for treatment, and I met, I met other police officers. I met a major from the military who served in my regiment like 20 years ago, and lawyers, and, you know, I'm sure they were all ashamed of being there as well. But, you know, we didn't ask to become addicted. It's not something it wasn't a goal that we all set out to get hooked on some type of substance, and the bad behavior doesn't make you a bad person, and
define you, right?
You don't
let it define
you. I'm more than a police officer. I'm a son. I'm a husband. I'm a brunette. But
that someday you'll be a silver fox. That's right.
I hope so.
That's right.
Gradually.
That's right.
But yeah, and coming out of it, I felt like I was a very compassionate and empathetic, caring person prior to even going through this. But being back to work, it's funny how I can sniff it out. When we go to calls and there's, maybe somebody's got some substance issues, or they're addicted, or there's problems. Everyone's behavior is the same when it comes down to substance abuse. It's not, it's not brand new. No one displays unique characteristics. It's quite similar, and I feel like I have a lot more compassion for people who are struggling. I've been there. I maybe not in the same scenario, but I know what it's like to feel ashamed and helpless. And what do you do? Like, I mean, it's not something that they teach you. Like, oh, if you ever get hooked on this is the number you got to call, and you have to tell people that, that you're weak, basically. I mean, but it's hard to explain. But coming out of this, it almost feels like a fresh start. It really does. And I've been asked, why are you so happy? 5:30 in the morning, day shift in there, and I'm smiling or laughing or joking, and so because there's nothing really to be miserable about. And I don't know.
I saw you personally during some periods of that transition, and I can tell you that you are an absolute different person than when I saw you in 2015, 16. And there's the fire behind the eyes again. There's enthusiasm. You're seldom, when I see you, you're not smiling now, right? And that's always good to see, because you see the other side, right? You always make sure you flip it on the other side and you see the glass is half full. Tell us about, okay, you're back now. How long have you been back?
I've been back operational for almost a year. The end of May would be the year. And my shift couldn't be any greater. I think my shift is like my anchor right now. They're awesome. I'll do patrol for life if I have to work with people like that. So I'm very happy. One of my things that I have, is I always try and look forward to something, like every day, just one thing, whether it's just showing up for briefing to have laughs, but there's always something that I always look forward to every day. So I don't know. And you know what? I'm just glad that things worked out the way they did, and I didn't go deeper into that hole and actually hit a rock bottom, because I think rock bottom would have been not waking up one day. So,
well, me too. Obviously, It's great to have you back. So I'm going to go over it again, because I just think it's so valuable. I want to make sure that everyone's picked up on it. Own it. Own whatever it is. Eliminate the stigma, meaning talk about it where you can, right? Mm-hmm. Be able to share your story with other people, because after you share it once or twice, you realize there's people there to support you, and that helps to be able to do it. I think as an organization, we need to continue to try to get better, not to make sure people don't feel isolated. Because there were times, I'm sure, where the connection goes a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month, whatever it might be, where you don't hear from anyone when you're off sick in this department. And those periods of isolation aren't good, right? So we need to make sure people always feel connected somehow.
Yeah, and though, actually, there was one point I was going to bring up, and I know I did have a lot of friends and support from the department, and I'm sure that they didn't reach out because they didn't know how to approach it.
Yes.
I mean, they didn't know they didn't know what was going on, and then all of a sudden they hear that I'm facing these charges, and no one wants to seem like they're prying so that they can gossip. But honestly, it's having anybody reach out, even prior to me getting caught by the RCMP, if someone would have said to me, "Man, you look like hell, you need some help," that maybe it would have made a difference. I had a best friend. I have a best friend. When I was going through this, we didn't really talk because I don't think he understood what I was going through, but we're best of friends again. But he saw me, and I don't know if it would have made a difference, but if he would have said to me, "You need help, and I'm not gonna hang around to watch you wither away and die. Let's go get some help," maybe it would have made a difference back then.
Absolutely.
And I know when people are off here or going through a hard time, it does feel like you're prying if you reach out to someone and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And you don't know how it's going to be interpreted by them. But I would have loved it back then when I was going through that, and maybe things would have been different, but they happened the way they did, and I'm here, And you're still keeping me on, which is a good thing.
I think you get paid every second Tuesday.
Yeah,
something like that.
Every second Tuesday?
I know.
I'm only getting once a month.
One other thing I just think is so valuable before we wrap up here is that you said now you're using what you know to help others. That's so key, whether it's inside the organization or whether it's helping our community to be able to ensure that we provide the best service we can as the Delta Police Department to our community. That's so valuable, right? If you can use what you've learned and, you know, for the grace of God, no one else has to go through what you did. I mean, that's really an advantage as well for us.
Yeah, if this reaches one person and they don't have to go through this, I mean, that was, going through all this, what my lawyer said is he goes, we went the distance so no one else has to go through this stuff.
Absolutely.
And, for the people that are curious out there and want to look at the public records, it was a lot. There was a lot of stuff we went through. And, I was the sacrificial lamb.
The document is, of course, on the Office of the Police Complaints Commissioner website, and that's where someone can find it to be able to go through the details of your trial and the Police Act investigation and the tribulations that you went through, and certainly the ability for us now to have a case to refer back to in circumstances of all first responders that may face similar circumstances. So before we sort of wrap up here, I want to make sure, Aaron, is there anything else you want to be able to ask Jeff? You've known him for some time.
No, I just want to thank you for coming in, Jeff. Some of the things that I'm taking from this, and it's we've heard it commonly throughout this podcast as well, is you really kind of, you can't change people's opinion of you, so you recognize that you kind of keep the people close to you who are positive and kind of give you that positive vibe, because you really aren't just, people are going to have their opinion, and that's their opinion, and it is what it is. And one of my best friends goes by this saying, and I think it's really applicable to you, new day, new life. And I think every day you kind of come in and it's a new day, it's a new life, and you look for something good in every day, and that's awesome, buddy. I commend you on that. It's really, that's good.
Yeah, no, it's like the tagline, the power of the story, and connecting with people and sharing experiences is what it's how we learn and progress. And I really do hope that no one has to go through what I went through, and but if they do, it's not the end of the world. They can get through it.
Bend, don't break.
That's right. And I felt like breaking many times. I was probably bent over backwards.
Well, let me end this way. I'm extremely humbled by you being able to come here and share. You're very open and transparent, and you do look great. So for anyone that's listening, certainly they know that you are fully recovered and contributing in a major way. I'm proud of you and what you've come through, and proud of you being able to share. And I'm happy for you, and happy for you and your family, and you were able to keep it all together. And I know that you are progressing with your career and your family and everything that's good in life. So congratulations. You deserve to be able to be here and be able to enjoy yourself. And I wish you nothing but the very best.
Thank you, Chief. And I'd like to thank you for your support. And I'm just, like I said, I'm just happy to be here every day.
These productions never come without a lot of work from everyone involved. A big shout out and thank you to Constable Aaron Hill, Melissa Granum, and Nikki Hewitt for producing and recording, and of course post-production done by Podfly. Next week on Bend, Don't Break.
So that was my rock bottom, and that's where I started drinking hard. And the worst is, now I'm a captain. So I'm actually in charge of the shift. Well, I don't want to talk to these guys. So I'm hiding in my room. I'm ignoring my own shift. I see them as little as possible. So now the downward spiral continues.
For more episodes, you can find us on iTunes and Google Play. If you have a story to tell, go to deltapolice.ca/podcast to submit your idea. Don't forget to subscribe to and rate our podcast. And if you want to connect, we're on all major social media platforms. Once again, thanks for tuning in.